It's quite common for kids that are older to still be, especially bedwetting at night.
I get referrals all the time for parents of 6, 7, 8, even 9-year-olds being like, they're wetting the bed, we don't know what to do.
I think that's a sign that maybe we've just taken it a little bit too far and we need to step it back to one of the previous steps. If the child has that increased anxiety, maybe we're not meeting them where they're at developmentally, physically, emotionally, mentally. We need to kind of step it back a bit and reduce that pressure and what we're asking of them, because we might be asking just too much.
Sometimes brains and bodies don't communicate in the best way, but we're working on it and we'll get there together, rather than like, you have wet the bed.
Yeah.
And it's not a you problem. It's something that this happens for a lot of kids and we can work on it together. I'm Emily Hanlon and I'm a child and adolescent clinical psychologist.
Hi, I'm Alaskah Hindry and I am a paediatric occupational therapist.
So let's talk about, let's start back with development. Do we want to just go back? So Emily, I just saw recently that you're going through a whole heap of things with your little one. Development in our kids, it looks so different, doesn't it?
It really does, and you probably see this in your work as well. Like, you look at developmental milestones, and for walking is a good example, because it's like, anywhere between 9 and 18 months is considered normal. I'm like, 9 and 8, that's literally like half their lives at that point. So
heaps,
it's hard to know what, when someone does need a little bit of support, when the spectrum is so broad of what is appropriate and what's not. And I think that's with all milestones, with sleeping through the night, that's going to be different for everyone. Toileting, self-feeding, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I think the thing with milestones, and social media has contributed to this, is that milestones were designed for us health professionals to be able to have a baseline and to be able to determine when there's something wrong. And I think parents, naturally, because it's discussed on social media so much, have taken milestones as their own personal knowledge.
Bible,
the Bible. And they're not the be-all and end-all. And as you said, that's such a broad range that it's just, I know as myself as a parent, it's just so stressful to be able to know if you're doing the right thing or not.
That's it. And then I think a lot of parents do turn to social media because it can be really helpful, but then they get a really catty response from a parent that's quite judgmental, and then they start to feel like, okay, well, maybe I've done something wrong, so I'm just going to isolate myself from that
such
situation.
a toxic milestone culture. That is.
It. It's tricky.
Yeah.
But I think too, just recognising that, our little ones are going to do things at different times, like you say, whether that's walking, whether it's toilet training. I always go back to sleep and toilet training seem to be like those big milestones that you take very, very personally. And I think if I've learned anything from my 3 kids, it's just let them do things on their own time.
That's it.
If something's telling you something's not right,
I know.
Get somebody, get advice.
We have a good gut instinct as mums, don't we, especially? And if there is something, internally, you go get help. Yeah.
I think that's what I wish more first-time mums realise, because with my first, I was ready to call the police. He just was not, he just did not get toilet training at all. It took so long, but we took a really similar approach with my second, and he was that unicorn that got it in 3 days. And I'm like, well, I'm the same parent and I've got 2 kids that needed such different levels of support from me. And with my second, we always say doing a lot of different things with our second is our reward for surviving our first in that regard. So, if I could go back and just pat myself on the back and say it's okay, or he's gonna get it, or if he needs more support to get it, or he doesn't quite get it for a few years, that's okay. It's going to be okay. But
not a reflection on your parenting.
Exactly.
If something's not clicking right.
Yeah,
I think parents take it to heart when something doesn't go to plan.
Exactly. It's not a reflection on you as a parent, and it's not a reflection on them as a child either.
And there are so many other external factors that can contribute to things like difficulties with toilet training. It's not necessarily, you could be doing everything you can be doing as a parent, but if there's something not happening right inside the body, or even an environmental, aspect, you can't put too much pressure on yourself. I feel like with things like that.
Totally. I think as well, kids get really caught up in the moment, right?
Absolutely.
So they'll be playing their favourite game, and you want me to stop playing to go to the toilet?
FOMO.
Absolutely not.
Yes. Yeah.
So, things happen in that regard, and it's very easy to pathologize a lot of that stuff, but if that's happening without context, then we need to be mindful of that as well. So I think it's, you know, like I guess that's where we step in, right, to figure out like contextually what's going on for this child and how can we
the full picture.
figure out exactly how to support them.
And I think when you look up on the internet, you know, I was browsing resources available to parents for toilet training. It goes straight to behavioural. It's a behavioural thing. They're being
chart,
oppositional.
3 days.
Yeah, that positive reinforcement. It's all about their behaviour and making out like the child is naughty or lazy or they're not doing it for a particular reason. But I think it's so important for parents to know that there is just so much more than just behaviour. And yeah, that's when to reach out to a health professional to get that underlying sort of investigation.
And I think what a lot of people don't realise is that there is such a broad, you know, stage of what that can look like. You know, it's quite common for kids that are older to still be, especially bedwetting at night. I mean, my 3 kids, I've got my youngest who does have a disability, who was toilet trained overnight, just decided she wanted to do it super easy, yet her 8-year-old brother was still wetting the bed at night. And it's really hard to wrap your head around that because you start automatically thinking, oh, there's something wrong, you know. But actually, when you start looking into the stats, it is actually quite common.
Totally.
It is just letting
it's
them do
so
it in their
common
own
for
time.
older kids to, especially at night, to, you know, having accidents and bedwetting and that sort of thing. And it's a number of factors. Like it's not like we were saying, it's not a behavioural thing. It's not a parenting issue. There's a lot. There's sleep, diet,
Hormone production.
Yeah, hormone production. Whether there is neurodivergence. You know, if a child is neurodivergent.
My kid's a deep sleeper.
Yeah, exactly. Just sleeping right through. There's so many factors that can go into it that I think parents don't realise. That I get referrals all the time for parents of 6, 7, 8, even 9-year-olds being like, they're wetting the bed, we don't know what to do. And I'm like, well, let's just ease off a little bit and figure out actually what's going on here.
But I think part of that is, you know, there is a bit of shame and stigma around that conversation. I know even for my son who had never had a sleepover and they're going to school camp, in year 4 they go to school camp, and I said, okay, well, I'll host the sleepover with your mates. We're going to have a trial run for camp, make sure everyone feels comfortable. And he said, yeah, but Mum, such and such still wears a nappy at night. And I said, well, that's all right. I mean, that's fine. That's perfectly okay. We'll work it out. And sort of just kept it so practical. And I think it was interesting because his response, he said, oh, you know, like we were talking about it in the playground. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing that these kids didn't feel shame. And I think that comes down to how you approach it in the house.
Absolutely.
100%.
You know, the
That child was totally comfortable talking to a friend about how he still wears something at night to support him with, you know, bedwetting. It's adults that put this pressure on kids to be able to conform and to sweep it under the rug and to do this and to do that because of the shame that we perceive is going to be put on us as parents and as adults. The kids, they
it's
couldn't
us
care
being
less.
frightened of being judged, isn't it, really, as parents?
Totally,
Yeah, because
100%.
kids don't really care, do they? I mean, they're very unfiltered, and if they don't have those sorts of ideas put into them in the first place, they're not going to care about talking about toileting. I mean, you see when I go to school drop-off in the morning, all the kids doing the fart jokes and, you know, things under the armpits and everything like that. Like, they don't mind toilet talk, but it's us as parents that pass that, you know, fear of judgment as a parent onto the kids, and then it translates.
Can I tell you, my youngest, this is a funny story I tell everyone, is so at one point we thought she'd need a device to talk and communicate. So she had this thing and she had to press all of the words and she was being assessed by a couple of people, and the first thing she'll do is she'll find the fart button or the poo button and she'll press it and she'll wait to see.
There.
I was like, oh, you know what, I don't care about anything else. You've got a sense of humour. This is hilarious.
That's hilarious.
It just shows, doesn't
Fart
it?
jokes translate in all languages
Yes.
and all communications.
All ways to communicate.
Every kid loves a fart joke.
But I think on the sleepover thing and the camp thing, because let's face it, kids can be a bit mean as they get older. They can pass on this, whether you like it or not. I think something I've learnt, even with this sleepover, you know, just tapping the other mum on the shoulder and reassuring her, because I knew that she was worried about it, and just said, let's hatch a plan. You know, we'll make sure that the kid's set up for success. He knows when he's going to, you know, come with his little bag to me, and I'll show him where to change and, you know, make sure that happens in the morning. And it was really cute because the kid did just that. He came up to me and he gave me that look as if to say, you know, it's time. And so we just made it all very discreet.
Yeah, it's all about that support and feeling supported, isn't it?
You
Within
just
your community.
need like one other mum to show you as a mum
Yes.
that even though I might not be going through what you're going through, I'm here if you need and I support you, and there's no judgment.
Yeah,
That's literally all you need.
Yeah. Now, toileting, I guess, well beyond, you know, the toilet training years, because this is something that, you know, obviously extends beyond that.
Absolutely.
What are some of those considerations, just for my own knowledge? Because I know that I've heard things like constipation and, or, you know, like we were saying, they don't sometimes want to stop what they're doing and actually go to the toilet. I mean, what are those typical things that you see?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is the interoception. So it's their, you know, and definitely with neurodivergent children is they lack those signals inside their body. So whether they're full or hungry or in pain or feeling hot and cold, and needing to wee or do a poo is one of those internal body signals. And sometimes when they have those underactive interoception skills, there is just no feeling there. So they have no ability to know if they're busting to go to the toilet until it happens and the accident happens. So it's got nothing to do with the child's behaviour or anything, you know, that they're probably trying their best, but if they can't feel what's happening inside their body, then they've got no ability.
That's it. And it's this 3-part process, right? So you've got interoception, so our ability, like you said, to understand like what's going in on the body, but you have to be able to read that cue. Number 1, identify that cue. My bladder's filling up. Number 2, you got to be able to act on that, like to interpret that cue. My bladder's filling up, so I need to go to the bathroom. Number 3, actually act on that. My bladder's filling up, I need to go to the bathroom, so I need to pull myself away from my favourite game and make sure I get to the bathroom in time. That is a lot of steps.
Yeah. It's quite amazing.
I struggle with that sometimes.
100%. Then throw in other things in there like time blindness. You know, a lot of, especially ADHDers, they struggle with time blindness and they think they have more time than they might actually have to get to the bathroom and that sort of thing. And that's when an accident might occur. And
Is that you're directing that at me, aren't you?
I mean, like,
I was sensing that you're picking up on me saying, I'll leave it to the last minute.
that's it, you know. So there's so many factors that go into it, and we are so quick to just throw it in the behaviour basket.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, when I'd say 99% of the time
it's not a
nothing to do with behaviour.
Very rarely is it, in my experience, you know, them being oppositional or defiant or, you know, testing the boundaries or anything like that. It's usually, it has an underlying cause. And then it can be quite a long, tricky process working out what that cause is and then treating that cause as well. And it really depends what it is. Like, you know, with that 3-step sort of strategy that you have there, you know, every single step there has so many skills and factors, you know, and you think about for our children that might have, you know, those kind of cognitive delays and that sort of thing, finding the bathroom and remembering all the steps of, you know, turn the light on, walk to the toilet, lift the seat up, pull your pants down. Like, it's actually quite amazing that, you know, 1.5 and 2-year-olds can actually understand the process.
And all the motor skills that go into that as well. Like the fine motor skills, taking your undies off, sitting on the toilet, getting toilet paper, locking the door.
Absolutely.
Like,
God. You know, doing the buttons and wiping is a huge one. Like, I know when it comes to toileting, there are so many gross motor and fine motor skills involved. As you said, the dressing and the wiping and everything like that. But once we're on the toilet, you know, do they have the environmental setup that supports comfortable toileting? Little ones, you know, they're small and sometimes their feet don't touch the ground. So can they get on the toilet? Do they have the core strength and the postural strength to balance on the toilet? Do they have something to hold on to? You know, I don't know about you, but I would not want to be sitting on the toilet with my feet off the floor, you know, trying to void or anything like that when I have an overactivated core, because that can make it a lot harder for them to, you know, voluntarily open their bowels or bladder. But think about the environmental setup. Do you have a footstool available for that stable base of support, which makes it a little bit more relaxing for them? You know, or some little the toilet seat aids that have like the railings and that sort of thing.
And I guess
to
getting
hold on
that
to.
stuff in schools as well.
Exactly.
Like, how do you do that?
Well, this is the thing, because obviously, these are kids that have gone beyond the toilet training stage.
Exactly.
They're still finding challenges, and the biggest thing I can say is, you know, public restrooms.
Disgusting.
You know, my daughter had an absolute fear if anything wasn't just pure white. She didn't want to go to the toilet, and
Her and me both.
she was held back a year from starting kindergarten. We had an exemption. And I was still concerned right up until that moment that she would not be able to go to the toilet at school, because we know what the toilet look like in the school
Absolutely.
environment.
The boys' ones, my God.
My God.
Yeah, and my daughter is quite sensitive in terms of her sensory system and that sort of thing. And she sometimes, even still in year 1, will withhold the whole day because she'll walk into the toilet and someone's not flushed their poo down the toilet and it stinks and there's a wee on the floor and there's wet toilet paper on the ceiling, and she is completely overwhelmed with the whole sensory aspect of using public toilets. You know, we go into a public toilet and the first thing she says is, "Oh my gosh, it stinks in here," you know. And we've even had to carry around a bit of that VI poo spray and it's a real strategy that I suggest to parents. Like, if you've got a child that is really overwhelmed, you think about it, toileting smells, and when it's not your poo, it smells even worse when you know you don't know who's done it. I've even had clients who automatically projectile vomit if they go into public toilets because of the smell. So carrying around a bit of that VI poo spray, just to spray before you go in, and you put it in the toilet before they do their business, and it removes the smell and the odour. But yeah, even still, my daughter really struggles with toileting at school in year 1. because of the smells and the sights, and there's people, and she's embarrassed someone's going to hear her.
But that's the thing, they often have to go in partners.
They do.
The night times, it is really tricky because if you're talking about especially neurodivergent kids, we know that, they can struggle with sleep a lot. So we finally get to the point where we're working on sleep, we've gotten to the point of sleep's finally falling into place for some people, and then the bedwetting. And then we're like, oh my God, now, like, do we wake them up to go to the toilet in the middle of the night? I'm like, if I get my kid to sleep, the house would have to be on fire for me to wake them up. Yeah. I'm not waking them up.
I had the opposite. I had this, person standing beside me in the bed, and you're like, oh,
who are you? Yeah.
What's happened?
But that's the thing. So it's like there's so many factors that can go into like bedwetting at nighttime and having those continence issues at nighttime. And again, I think a lot of kids feel a little bit of shame and stigma because us as parents can, get a little bit frustrated and it's more
especially
washing.
in the middle of the night at 1 a.m. You're like, what are you doing?
I've just got to need a bed, more washing, more this, more that. And we can accidentally put that onto kids as well. So I think it is really important to focus on like the language we use with kids and making sure that they understand that sometimes brains and bodies don't communicate in the best way, but we're working on it and we'll get there together, rather than like, you have wet the bed.
Yeah.
And it's not a you problem. It's something that this happens for a lot of kids and we can work on it together.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it's about just your setup before bed and setting up during the day for the night times to make it easier. Like, don't tackle it in the moment when you're frustrated and you're ripping sheets off and, everything. Set it up for the night, anticipating that there's going to be some bedwetting. You can do the double layers of the little spewy mats and the waterproof sheets, and set up a double layer of the bed sheet so you can just quickly rip it off, chuck it, put the kid back to bed.
Yeah, if you have a leak, then it's not.
Yeah, not a big deal. Yeah.
I noticed even with my son, actually, that happened recently, and something I found really surprising, and now I share with anyone who cares to listen, is the fact that breathing has an impact. So he has a lot of allergies, his nose is always blocked. I've had to do the nose sprays at night, and I found when that's particularly heightened and he's really blocked up and struggling, that's generally where we see that. So I found it interesting even chatting to Dr. Deb and understanding a little bit more about why that occurs. I mean, people automatically think, when you get to an older kid wetting the bed at night, that you have to go and see a urologist, or it's like this big dramatic thing, when actually there are so many different things you can investigate.
So many things, especially I know for us with my oldest, who's 6, if he's overtired and in that deep sleep, I'll say to Josh, he's going to wet the bed tonight. Like, I just know, especially when we come back from a holiday and there's so many factors that go into it that are environmental. Yeah. And
the flight thing, I've heard about this a lot. Whenever you've been on a flight, the kids will typically...
without a doubt, to the point we double sheet after a overseas holiday because we know it's going to happen.
Double sheeting is the best hack that anyone ever told me.
100%.
Because then you're only ripping one off and there's
that's
another
it.
one there.
You're not fighting for your life with mattress corners in the middle of the night. Worst nightmare.
Fitted sheets are the worst. My nightmare.
But that's it. Like, we're so quick again to put it all it's behavioural, or they should have outgrown this, or this or that. But then you look at it, there's allergies, there's how they breathe, that there's so much biologically that goes on for these kids that we glaze over. And I think it is really important to have that holistic approach of having a good stakeholder team that can look at things from kind of every angle. And I don't know, I can look at things from the emotional side, you can look at things from the sensory side, I think it's important.
Yeah, or even just your GP. I mean, we have to
Totally.
see the GP for general things. I find sometimes you've just got to mention these things in conversation to connect the dots, otherwise you don't kind of know where to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, up until recently, I know that nose breathing has always been important, but it's become the flavour of the month recently.
Yes.
So up until then, I'm sure I think I'm a mouth breather. Maybe I should go to the GP.
Well, you know what? We take plenty of videos of our kids sleeping, and it's so telling about whether they're mouth breathers. You should ask your husband to take some videos
that's not
while
weird.
you're asleep.
While you're fast asleep.
Great. Looking forward to it.
That would be flattering.
And Emily, I'm like, I don't know. I use my son as an example a lot, but I've got an 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 7-year-old. But I've found just even the embarrassment, how that kind of shifts. Like, when they start to become 8 or 9, is that kind of, I guess, from a psychological point of view, you're a psychologist, is that where they become a little bit more aware of what people might think of them, or the shame that sort of surrounds these things? Because I notice, he'll even pretend he hasn't wet the bed. When he has, he goes, I'm just a bit wet. And I'm like, why are you changing your pyjamas in the middle of the night? Oh, no, I didn't wet myself, it was just wet. And he started to kind of be really conscious when typically we're pretty practical about it. He hasn't felt a bit ashamed. Does that kind of change?
I think it's, that those pre-teen years as well is when kids socially, they are starting to develop, but also kids are developing at such different rates. And in any given year group, there can be a child that could be up to 2 years older than another child in that year, depending on who started at what age. So kids are developing at different stages. And socially, everything becomes a competition. They want to look cool in front of their friends. They are starting things like camp, and maybe the cat's come out of the bag at camp that someone, did have an accident, that sort of thing. And even though parents may not be instilling that shame, it can feel like a really shameful experience. Maybe they have younger siblings that have also figured it out, and they're like, well, if they figured it out, why haven't I? Is there something wrong with me? Sort of thing. Or there's so much going on. But for me, it's just about whenever my oldest has an accident, or when I'm talking to clients about their kids having accidents, I just say to them, just say, thanks for letting me know. Do you need any help?
Yeah.
It's not about like, how can we fix this? I'll remember next time to go to the toilet. You don't always have to fix it. No. It's just about acknowledging that child has been brave enough to let you know that something's happened, and you don't have to jump into like prevention for the future. You just need to jump into making them feel comfortable in that moment and making them feel brave enough and proud enough to have told you what's going on.
Absolutely. And I think at that older age, they know that they need to be at the toilet at that time, and they know. So I just don't think they need the reminders constantly of, well, you should have done that in the toilet, and we goes in the toilet, because they know. They just need that really quick, do you need help? No? Okay, cool. And just move on.
Do you think that makes them more anxious? Like if, they've got this pressure on them because they have been bedwetting the mums, or the parents, I shouldn't say mum, parents. We're all responsible for the nighttime routine, are we not? But is it that, it's like we get a bit, we can't drink water before bed and you can't do this, and I feel like...
Make sure you go to the toilet before you do. No water bottles.
Make them a bit more anxious.
100% it would,
Nighttime routines are hard enough as it is.
Stressful time of the day.
Yeah, seriously.
Absolutely.
No, I definitely think it can make them more anxious. I think it is about simplifying it, and sometimes that might go against the advice that you've gotten from therapists and that sort of thing about, restricting fluid intake and stuff. And for some kids, that might work. For others, where you're starting to see anxiety increase, I always go back to nothing is more important than mental health. I'm sorry, but nothing is. So if you're doing those things and you're starting to get that gut feeling that all these behavioural things are starting to not feel right for our family, there's no shame in stopping. Absolutely. It's all about doing what's right for you and your child.
And I think that's a sign that maybe we've just taken it a little bit too far, and we need to step it back to one of the previous steps. If the child has that increased anxiety, maybe we're not meeting them where they're at developmentally, physically, emotionally, mentally. We need to kind of step it back a bit and reduce that pressure and what we're asking of them, because we might be asking just too much.
And we might have missed something. Going back helps you figure out what you might have missed.
Absolutely. Backtrack.
We're all bloody tired. I'm sorry.
Oh my God,
Parents are tired. We're exhausted.
I am so tired all the time.
Yes, one child.
Been tired for a long time.
That's it.
I wore the women's Depends, just the cheap ones, because I was not buying the expensive ones, because I just bought the cheap, and they're awful. I feel for the older people that have to wear those and rely on them.
They move around.
The seams, scratchy, rough. It's like kind of wearing like tinfoil. Like in your underpants, they're like, and every time you move, it's like.
You can hear it.
Not very dignifying.
Everyone knows I'm wearing a nappy
you can
right
see
now.
them from the outside of your clothing as well. Like 100%. I was wearing track pants and stuff, and you could see the bulge of the nappy.
So
it was not.
These poor kids. No wonder these poor kids have probably been shoved in the same nappies when they're younger. No wonder they're feeling uncomfortable and conscious about it.
100%.
And you can see it through clothing, and you can see the lines that you're wearing it, and it gets that bulge in between the legs and that sort of thing.
Especially when it starts to fill up a little bit.
Not dignifying.
If they have an accident, it can be quite obvious. And on school camp, do you want to, if they're feeling that way, imagine on school camp in front of all their friends, knowing that they may have had an accident, but then having to walk through a whole campsite of their friends to let a teacher know that they might need
You're already self-conscious. You don't need to worry about what it looks like to other people and that sort of thing. So when it comes to those sort of products, having them be discreet is really important, I think.
Comfortable.
And comfortable.
Yeah.
Soft. It's the biggest one. Yep.
Yeah.
And kids get annoyed by any little
That's it.
Oh, for sure.
scratchy tag, socks.
We know as well that especially neurodivergent kids struggle with a lot of sensory input.
Absolutely.
So putting them in a product that then heightens their sensory insecurities is just like a recipe for meltdown.
Oh, there goes their attention, their engagement in class, their ability to socialise,
their emotional regulation.
Absolutely.
Everything.
Yeah, everything's out the window basically if their sensory system is in overdrive.
100%.
It's hard for the teachers, and it's hard for us as parents at home. their sensory system really is like the core, I feel like, for those kids that are quite sensitive.
Yeah.
In the entire day. If they're not regulated in their sensory system, then everything else is harder to engage in and participate in, and everything like that.
Totally.
And it's like when you go to school, I remember Jen from Jen Muir, our parenting educator, she was always saying about, when they start kindy, it's like learning a new language. And I think we underestimate that they're learning new rules. Where do you have to line up? How do I transition from one thing to another? So then we've got all of this other added pressure, whether or not the result of that is that they actually have accidents during the day, or maybe they are dealing with such significant changes that at night time they're all of a sudden regressing. And,
and the regressions are so normal. Yeah, totally. and happen quite commonly. And as you said, like if there is something in their life happening, whether there's a new sibling or they've moved to a different house, or they're trying, they're using all their brain power during the day to stay well behaved at school and concentrate at kindergarten and that sort of thing, regressions are really, really common.
But you know what as well, they start school and they're told like, you do your wheeze in break time, right?
Yes.
So you're telling me that 5, 6, 7-year-olds have to eat their lunch, get in a full half an hour of social play and use the bathroom all in like 35 minutes.
And come back to class regulated and have had enough gross motor movement.
Say, oh, I have to go to the toilet. And it's like, no, you should have gone at break time. That's a recipe for an accident, especially for a child that may struggle with interoception. Like we were saying, it's a 3-step process, recognizing what's happening internally, identifying what that means for them, and then acting upon it. And you're asking them to do that while they're eating, while they're playing, while they're trying to socialize, while they're doing all these things, and then punishing them when they actually do pick up on those cues in the classroom. So I always say to parents as well, it's okay to let the teacher know that this is happening.
Oh, I've certainly
done that. You have to advocate. You've
got to. And don't be afraid to as well. You know, like I think a lot of parents don't want to be the squeaky wheel and be the one that's always contacting the teacher. But again, it's coming down to emotional and physical well-being at the end of the day.
But I think they just hear these rules. I know that for my kids, I had to be that parent that said to them, because my daughter stopped drinking water.
Oh, no.
Because she was saying, well, Mum, then I need to go to the toilet, but I don't need to go to the toilet at the same time as everyone else. And she was really withholding, and it was becoming a problem. And,
totally.
You've got to put your hand up and say, like, they take you literally, but if they really need to go.
Though, but also, as an adult, if someone said to you, you were only allowed to wee between 10 and 10:30,
that doesn't work.
Would you be like, okay, thanks for letting me know, I'll only go to the toilet during that time?
Yeah, absolutely not. And I feel like the poor kids are conditioned to be such people pleasers and follow the rules that, I know my daughter personally, she is absolutely terrified of getting a detention or a reflection and won't step out of line with the teacher's expectations. So, and I think the teacher's expectations on, only going to the toilet in break times and things like that also teaches them like that it's a shameful, that they're not meant to be doing it, and it gives that negative stigma around going to the toilet as not a natural process and not really something we can control. When you have that urge, especially for our kids that have that poor interoceptive signals on the, internally in their body, they don't feel that they need to go to the toilet like we do. They don't get those, you get that little bit of tightness in your bladder and you can go, oh, okay, in half an hour I'm probably going to need to go to the toilet. They get it and it's urgent and they need to go, and it's not their fault
they've missed
that
those
they're getting that.
cues.
They don't detect those early cues.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I think the scheduling of it all just goes against what we're trying to teach kids, whether it's with feeding or toileting, is about them learning to listen to their body and acknowledge these.
It's counterintuitive, isn't it? These poor kids, man. Like,
I know they can't win, can they? And they come to therapy and we're all about that mind-body connection and the body mapping and being really present with your body.
Between these rules.
Yes, but then they,
Tell us a bit about this, because I'm curious, this body mapping.
Yeah, so we do a little bit of body mapping for like the clients that I see at work as well, and it can lead to, it can be targeting their emotional regulation or their sensory processing. But if you think about it, this day and age, we're also consumed in devices and rushing, and our schedules are busy. Sometimes the kids just need to lay there and be really in tune with their body, and we go from head to toe and we talk about what can you feel in your head and what can you feel in your eyes, and squeeze your hands, and really being present in what's happening with our body. And that can be a really great strategy. Just 5 minutes, lay down with your child in the middle of the lounge room and get them to feel what's happening. Do you feel your digestive system working, or do you have butterflies in your tummy, or can you feel your tummy and see if you need need to go to the toilet, and be really hands-on. And that can be a really great mindful process to get them connecting, you know, their brain to their body and what's happening internally.
Sounds ideal to me if I get to lay down on the...
I know.
I'll take it. Yeah.
5 minutes of peace.
Yeah, it would be nice.
Do it.
It's almost like those things where they those things on social media where they say the dad just lays there and tells them to do like a
There
real
must be
life
body
drill.
mapping. Must be nice.
Yeah, seriously.
And I don't know about you, but for me, I always would go into that supermarket praying, is tonight going to be the night that it's going to finally be over and we're not going to have nighttime bedwetting? But the reality is you still have to keep stocking up on, you know, those overnight nappies. And let's face it, when you've got, you know, kids that are wetting the bed at night time well into their, you know, 9s, 10s and whatever, you're trying to squeeze them into something that's
tiny things.
covered in characters.
Yeah.
And my son's got eczema. I remember they were rubbing and scratching his skin and he just did not want to wear them.
That's the thing, they're itchy, they're uncomfortable, the tabs of holding on for, you know, dear life, trying to stay on an older child. But then the only other option is the options they have for geriatric leakage. So they do, you know, thankfully now there is another product that is supportive of that sensory system, that's soft, that's comfortable, that's discreet, and that can really support these kids in all aspects while they're navigating something tricky.
Totally.
Yeah, and I think for the kids that have those sensitive tactile systems and are very sensitive to touch, it can be super distracting and really debilitating in everyday life. And I think it's great that there is a product now that can just let them focus on being kids and playing and not worrying about leakages and not worrying about what it looks like from the outside and not worrying about how it feels on their body. I think it's just so important for the kids to be able to just focus on what they do best, and it's playing, learning, and just being kids.
And I know, like, obviously I feel like I'm in a place of privilege sometimes because, you know, my kids are on the NDIS, they have concerns, and I know to go to an occupational therapist. I know that I have psychologists that can support me with any of these things, but for so many, they don't have access. And they probably, you know, find that even buying nappies, you know, it's an expensive cost sometimes. So, yeah, I think it's helpful when that information is readily available or that access to support is there. Yeah, like I feel like a lot of the time, parents don't know where to turn and they probably feel a bit stressed and alone in it themselves because, let's face it, you always think you're the only person going through something. I don't know, I mean, you probably see far more people or talk to far more people than I do when it comes to this.
That's the thing, and when parents come in and they start to express any sort of concern around continence, I always try and get to the bottom of is this anxiety provoking for you as a parent, or is this anxiety provoking for your child, or both? And if it is a parent anxiety, then that's going to be a different ballgame because it's all about, you know, I want to support the parent to be able to understand that it's okay, and I want to give them information about how, you know, lots of children are going through this, and I think we all want to be that perfect parent. And sometimes it just takes one parent to say, actually, this is really hard and I'm going through this too. And sometimes you as the parent have to be that brave one that puts their hand up so that other people can come to you and say, oh my God, we're going through that too. I'll never forget when I first had my oldest, there were a couple of other girls I went to school with that had babies around the same time. And I would say, like, how are you going? And they were all like, yeah, good. And they'd be like, how about you? I'm like, it sucks. This is so hard. And they'd be like, oh, thank God, me too. So I always say to parents, if someone is claiming to be the perfect parent in your circle, delete their number because they're a big liar. No one is the perfect parent, you know?
But maybe it's not even them being the perfect parent. Maybe they're just like barely coping and, you know,
Holding
we do
on,
put on this front because we do want to do everything right and we do want to do it for ourselves. And I think sometimes, you know, parents are alone. Maybe they weren't as lucky to have people in their corner that are having babies at the same stage. I know I didn't.
I didn't either.
Yeah.
I was completely on my
I
own
had to rely on a
when it came
mother's
to that
group.
sort of thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yep.
And I know often, you know, it's our own anxiety that kind of comes into play. I mean, I've got 3 kids on the NDIS. There was a point in time where I was so anxious, but I actually didn't know I was anxious. And I was throwing everything at the morning routine. I was doing the visuals. I was doing everything I was being told to do. And it wasn't until I kind of hit that point where I had to go and seek help for my own anxiety and did something about it that actually the mornings became so much easier.
That's
and
it.
I think we underestimate how much of our own stuff gets put onto our kids. And we don't mean to, but it just happens.
But that's why they always tell you in an emergency, put your oxygen mask on before you help the child sitting next to you, because you can't support them if you haven't supported yourself first. Yeah. So I think parents...
That's hard when your plane's crashing.
Yeah. Okay, pretend it's not. But I think it's about parents recognising their own emotions, recognising and putting their hand up and saying, this situation around the continence issues that we've been experiencing in our home, this has been really hard and it's taken a toll on my own mental health, and maybe me as a parent, I need to take a step back and figure out what's going on so that doesn't project on my kids, so that we don't end up in this vicious cycle of everyone being anxious about wheeze, you know.
And I think we don't do that enough as parents. We just put our feelings aside so much, and we just think we'll just tough it out and we'll just, you know, we'll be fine as long as we're working on our kids and focusing on our kids. But I think it's so important, and I know for, you know, a lot of the families that I see, there is so much carer burnout, and the carers are absolutely at their wits' end with so many things and so burnt out. And I think it's totally fine if, you know, difficulties with continence, sorry, difficulties with continence causes that burnout, because it can be really triggering. You know, there's a lot of mess and a lot of washing that's involved, and a lot of stress and that fear of judgment in the community.
And it stinks.
It can, exactly.
Lack of sleep.
Lack of sleep, like, it can contribute to so much. And if you are feeling burnt out because of, you know, difficulties with continence, it's totally fine. You're not alone.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the fact that we used to have a village and community.
Absolutely.
We don't have that now. We've got people in very different situations as well, and I think it just adds to the isolation and kind of wearing that. And I also think when you're in it and you're really in it, you can't see that. You can't do that self-reflection, and we need someone to tap us on the shoulder. I know that's what happened to me. The only reason I went to the doctor to look at my own anxiety, my own situation, is because 3 different people on the same day asked me if I was okay, and I nearly had a breakdown. And then I was like, oh, this is weird. This isn't me.
Maybe I'm not.
Maybe I'm not okay. So I think that's where we need to look out for each other and go, especially if someone on the NDIS or getting diagnosis, like, reach out to them and just say, but how are you doing?
Yeah.
Because it's tough. Like, it's
That's
really
the thing.
hard.
And I think we think that we're so isolated. We think we're the only people going through this, but odds are there are lots of other mums at your own school, in your child's own class, that are experiencing the same thing. I think it's just about trying to find those people that hear you, that understand you, and that support you, rather than trying to fit into this other, like, cookie cutter mold of what, you know, other parents might be showing a different front. We don't want to be around those parents. We want to be around the parents that are supportive. Yeah, find a village and stay there.
And if I've learned anything, I'm quite vocal on these WhatsApp groups. I know everyone talks about the school WhatsApp groups. And I have a mission that every time I make a comment or every time I see a conversation, I always want to just post something that changes someone's perception or their idea about something, because there's a lot of very neurotypical and a lot of these kind of generalised conversations and advice, which I think the people that are going through challenges makes it so much harder for them. So it's almost like, just pushing the button or being open about something. And I can guarantee you, every time I do that, I get a separate thread start up and someone goes, thank you so much for saying that. And I think if that's my job and I can do that, then it's going to make a difference.
Totally.
Yeah, I think we're conditioned, you know, myself as a neurotypical individual, conditioned to not be very accommodating of, you know, what other people need. But, you know, obviously with my lens now as an occupational therapist and working with so many families, you know, I would like to hope I'm a little bit more accommodating and that sort of thing. But I think as society, we need to really be shifting our focus and learning to be accommodating of people's needs, and not having neurodivergent children and neurodivergent individuals having to fit into our cookie cutter. It needs to be the opposite.
Yeah, and if that means, you know, takes them a little bit longer to figure out bedwetting and continence difficulties, or that means they need to wear something to support them during the day, then so be it. What is the big deal?
What's the problem?
Yeah.
Really? Yeah.
What impact does that have on you?
And a lot of what we hear from our little kids comes from what happens in the homes. And I think
Seriously.
language, I think just raising kind humans that are inclusive and recognise everyone is beautiful and contributes something to the world. For sure.
Totally.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes from, you know, institutional sort of things as well. You know at my daughter's school, they're currently advertising how they get that, you know, that sexual education. You know, those people come out and talk about all those sorts of things and changes with our body. But I think it also, difficulties with continence needs to be more talked about in those sorts of environments, and in classrooms as well. It should be a part of PDHPE and it should be normalised. And, you know, I think that would also help stemming from that sort of thing. I think in my experience with working with families and really getting down to the root cause of these sorts of things like difficulties with continence is that the way that we look at parenting now is completely different to how our parents or our grandparents looked at parenting. And, you know, especially when it comes to children's milestones in development, I think back then it was very, you know, there was a lack of research, there was no online resource. It was very cookie cutter. Whatever your GP said was what you followed. And if your child wasn't following that schedule, it was, you know, panic. Whereas now we are so much more accommodating to following the children's developmental cues and really being in tune with our kids and looking online and educating ourselves as parents, you know, with a variety of resources. And I think now these days, really just easing that pressure is important, that children develop, you know, it's not, their development is not linear and they don't develop the same as the child next to them, and that's totally okay. And the research tells us that that's normal as well, and kids develop on their own timelines.
Do you think that is the pressure for parents though? Because obviously generationally we know that grandparents are, there's a very large percentage of grandparents looking after kids. So they've obviously got their idea of milestones, development, toileting, what that should look like. And that puts a lot of pressure then on the parents because they feel like they're doing something wrong.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the grandparents love to pass on their opinions and oh, back in my day, this is how we parented. And I think, you know, I know for me posting online, I get lots and lots of comments from that generation telling me, oh, I can't believe you're rolling your baby into tummy time. Like, how dare you? I think they are set in their ways and, you know, they have the ways that they were taught, and then that kind of passes down through the generations. And sometimes as a parent, we need to look at ourselves and reflect. Are we parenting in the modern age, or are we listening to someone else's outdated opinions? Are we being, you know, neurodiverse affirming or understanding and really being in tune with our children's cues and things like that? Are we, you know, we have to get with the times, and we have so many resources available. We're really, really lucky as parents.
I think you only know what you know though.
That's
I mean,
true.
I think that generation, that's what they knew.
Absolutely.
That's 100% it. I think the biggest thing now, we have this absolute privilege of having access to so much more information than the generation before us. So I always say to parents that come in and they're anxious about, you know, continence issues that might be going, you know, on at home. I'm like, let's talk about what that looks like and why that is a problem for you. And if we have to make accommodations, or they have to wear a specific product to, you know, support them with that during the day or at night, then so be it. Yes. Let's shift the narrative a little bit away from shame, and let's talk about some of the language we can use to affirm that this is not a problem that you have caused, or that there's something wrong with you. It's just something that's going on. You know, our brains and our bodies sometimes take a little bit longer to figure things out. So why don't we use this in the meantime so that we can keep supporting your brain and your body to connect in a way that works for you.
I love that, you know, because I think sometimes it feels like a dirty little secret. And I know, you know, I was speaking to another mum whose kid was going through it, and it was almost like she was whispering and trying to hide it. And my response was just to keep it super practical and open. Like, oh gosh, like in our house we talk openly about this stuff. It's totally okay, like not a problem. We can do it. And obviously respecting, you know, if a child does want you to be discreet, that's fine. But I think normalising it in the home and just using very practical language. You know, if they have to go and get their nappy before bedtime as part of their routine, go and grab it. You know, like and I wouldn't hide that stuff from siblings either, because again, you don't want them thinking, well, there's something wrong with that child because they're doing it different to what I do.
Yeah. I think what's tricky at the moment is I think we are sort of in that shift of parenting where we still have some parents that are kind of, you know, more discipline based and not so much taking the approach that maybe the younger parents, like maybe myself, are taking, where we're a little bit more open with talking about bodily functions. And I'm very open and honest with my daughter, and, you know, we talk about advocating for herself and her body. And I think we're kind of in that shift at the moment where this new age of parenting and the younger people that have grown up with social media and phones are coming through. And I think there is a little bit of that, you know, difference in parenting.
So the big
there.
question is, are you a fart household or a non-fart household? This is a hot debate in social media.
Oh my God.
We love a fart joke. We have fart apps on our phone, whoopee cushions.
Yeah.
You know,
we got them for Christmas.
Yep.
My son wrapped a fart for his brother for Christmas,
Great.
and that was put under the tree.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, so that was a fun Christmas morning experience.
The new age of parenting, hey?
Book
farts
week.
for Christmas.
Book week, they can dress as
The fart.
The fart book. There you go.
Everything's a book these days. It's a lot of fun, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. I think
you know what?
That's it. If it works and it normalizes these conversations and it reduces stigma, then I'm all for it. Who
Keep
cares?
it funny, use humour.
Yeah.
Can I ask actually, because I have read something from psychologists in the past about the fact that actually when kids are anxious and nervous, they do make those kind of jokes when they're really worried or concerned about toileting or whatever. That's often when it's quite heightened in terms of their jokes around it.
Well, I see, especially in my almost 6-year-old, I see when he's in social situations and he like wants to like look like really cool in front of his friends and that sort of thing. That's where the toilet humour comes out, and he starts talking about farts and poos and weeds. So absolutely, I think it's it's kind of masking our anxiety with a bit of humour and trying to be the funny one.
We do it
So,
as adults,
100%.
right? I mean, it's just probably not
Yeah.
the toilet humour, but we do it as adults. I know when I'm in an awkward situation, I start trying to crack the jokes and lighten up the mood in the room and, make it a little bit funny, and kids cope
It's
with
just
their
their way of
anxieties.
doing it.
And it's funny, like kids, they respond so differently, to things when they're anxious or they're feeling worried about things. They don't always react in the same way. And I know it's kind of a bit of a challenge in our family trying to identify that.
I think a lot of the time we have this idea that kids should come out of the womb being able to recognise emotions and express them and regulate them perfectly. And that's just not the case. A lot of kids need a little bit of extra support in that area. And one thing I always say to parents, if you are concerned that your child is not really identifying their emotions properly and not able to regulate them, start modelling that for them. Just label the emotions that you're having at home. Oh, I'm feeling so frustrated because this jar is so hard to open. Oh, I'm feeling so loved because Dad brought me home some flowers. Oh, I'm feeling so annoyed because I'm missing the one ingredient I need to cook dinner. Just label the emotions so that children can see, oh, this is really normal to have a big range of emotions throughout the day. And it's okay because mum's having those emotions too. I'm not the only one having all these experiences.
And I think modelling is really important for our children. I mean, the same could go for interoception, talking about how your body is feeling throughout the day. Oh, I'm getting a little bit of a bubbly butterfly feeling in my stomach because I'm a little bit slightly anxious, and labeling it to and connecting it to the emotion as well. And I think that's a really great way to teach interoception is, oh, I need to do a poo. I'm feeling a little bit of heaviness in my bottom, and talking about those really normal feelings in our body. Oh, I'm hungry. I can feel in my tummy. It's moving around and it's, speaking to me, and modelling it and talking the child through what's happening in your body is a really great way to teach interoception as well.
On that, it can be really helpful to then, if a child says, I'm hungry, going, okay, well, how do you know that you're hungry?
How do you know?
Tell me about that. I need to go to the toilet. Really? Thank you. Let's go. What was your body telling you?
Show me where on your body
what
you're
were the
feeling
signs sort of thing. So just using those everyday kind of experiences that are naturally happening to help them make the connection. Not teach them a lesson, just help them make the connection between this is what I need and this is how I know I need it.
And I think that's an important reminder, because this day and age we're always rushing, or we're on our phones and we're always busy and running around, and I think it's a really important reminder to just slow down, and our kids need us to slow down sometimes and just walk them through things really slowly. I think it's an important reminder.
Actually,
slow
let's
down.
face it, we need to slow down.
Well, we do. But we need
I
to
know
slow
whenever
down.
my kids, they do something, I go, oh, you're doing something that's slowing me down, and it makes you super aware of how fast you are trying to rush them through.
Totally.
And it's the same for milestones. We're trying to rush people through sleeping through the night. We're trying to rush them through toileting and all of
everything.
these things.
Yeah, down to shoelaces. I tell my families, your child is not going to learn how to tie their shoelaces if you don't just let them have the opportunity in the morning. But we're running late, we're rushing out the door. It's quicker for us just to quickly do their shoelaces and run out the door. I know, and that's what
Same
it's like.
with wiping. It's so much quicker for me to
Just
wipe a
wipe.
butt than it is for them to do it. But at some point it's gonna. Now we started. Kids start school, and you're like, oh dear.
And you're not
they don't
there.
know how to wipe a bottom.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I was just thinking that the minute you said it, that it's like that shout from the bathroom.
Yeah.
Can you come and wipe my butt? And then I pretend I haven't heard it, so he has to go. So my husband has to go and wipe the bum. But yeah, I just have these visuals of your child at school for the first time going,
Someone.
hello, I was there to wipe my bum. Yeah, no, there wasn't.
Yeah, it's really important to take those moments just to slow it all down and break down the steps, and really just that gives them the confidence and that sense of independence as well when they are out in the community, and as they get older, you know, they have that confidence and independence to, you know, be without us.
And I even know, like, my kids all had very different experiences with toileting, and I know with one of my kids, they were at school putting wads of toilet paper down there because there was that feeling of wetness, and when it came down to it, it was constipation, that there was chronic constipation there that was pushing on the bladder, that was causing the wetness. And I'm sorry, but when you're busy, you've got 3 kids, it's really hard to know that that is the potential cause. So I'm guessing, you know, they're the kind of interventions or the things that we need to look at, because sometimes it's not as obvious.
No, absolutely. And I think as parents, you know, it's hard for me to take my hat off as a medical professional, but, you know, you're not medical professionals, so you can't also have that pressure on yourself to know everything, because you just don't. And that's why it's so important to know who you can reach out to. Go to your GP, go to your paediatrician, question them, ask them, and they will be able to refer you onwards as well to who you need to be to.
You know, we've spoken a lot about how parents have a lot of emotions, and parents feel high anxiety and high shame around these continence issues, but children are also having these experiences. Older children, they know that, you know, they might have had an accident or there's a continence difficulty going on. And I think when they come to us and they're looking ashamed, embarrassed, frustrated, nervous, it's really important, and I always tell parents to respond with just validating that feeling. There's no need to jump straight into problem solving mode. It's really important that that child knows that it's okay, they're not alone, and then you're in their corner to support them. You know, I can see that you're feeling a little bit embarrassed. I get that. When I was your age, something similar happened to me and I felt really embarrassed too. One thing that really helped me was talking to someone that could help me, you know, change my sheets, or telling an adult that could help me change out of my wet pull-up and put something else on. Can I help you in any way? Is there something I can do to make this easier for you? And all of a sudden it goes from, there's a lesson to be learned here, to, oh, I feel supported. And now next time this happens, I know who to go to, and I know I'm not in trouble, and I know no one's judging me.
And look, we're not perfect parents.
No.
I'm sure there's been times where I've gone, didn't I tell you to go to the toilet before you went to bed? I told you not to drink that apple juice.
That's
you know,
it.
I think, yeah, let's be real, it does come up.
It does.
Sometimes.
We're tired, we're doing our best. But I think with that support, that's how we build the confidence in our kids as well. When they're feeling supported and there's that base of support, that's how their confidence builds and their independence builds and things like that. So I think that real support at home, knowing that you are their safe place and they can come to you and talk to you about these sorts of things, is really important.
That's it. And as a parent, it's not about getting it right 100% of the time. It's just about trying to be as consistent as possible. I'm be the first to put my hand up and say that I've yelled, screamed and shouted when I maybe shouldn't have. But it's all...
There's the psychologist screaming at a kid.
Yeah, that's probably what the neighbours say. But it's all about just going, okay, you know, I didn't handle that in the best way, so I'll talk to my child about that. And that's what I say to parents. It's okay to not be switched on to perfect parenting all the time. It's just about how you manage those ruptures when they do happen.
It's our first time here on earth as well, just like our kids. And yeah, I think you're right. Like, and when we're talking about continence issues amongst older children, they're older. They can sit down and have that really honest discussion, and you can reflect, you know, as a parent. I know I sit down with my daughter and say, look, the way I just handled that, you know, probably wasn't nice. Next time I probably won't yell at you. I'm sorry, you know, talk about things like that.
No guarantees.
There's no guarantees ever, you know what it's like when you're a parent and you're caught up in the moment and you're overwhelmed. But I think you can have those honest discussions and reflect with your child, and, you know, maybe not in the moment when they've made a mess and they need that immediate help. But afterwards, you can always reflect as well with your child and sit down and talk about their feelings. How did that make you feel, and that sort of thing.
I can imagine for some kids at school that are having the daytime wedding, that, you know, they are conscious of being around their friends, and then maybe they missed out on playing chase or handball. I mean, yeah, we want them to feel confident to go about their day to day.
Yeah, and I think the beautiful thing about using a pull-up in situations like this is that it just allows the kids to focus on being them, being kids, learning, being with their friends, playing. And I think pull-ups are a really fantastic tool, and something that I suggest to my clients all the time, just to allow the kids to engage in those occupations that are important to them every day.
Just alleviate the pressure.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
the anxiety that might come, you know, to a child constantly when they know that continence is something that they struggle with.
And they're supported. It's a really great way to build their confidence in the long run as well.
Totally.
And I think when a children is in pull-up, sometimes that's not their end goal or where they will end up in their toileting journey. And I think it's still really important that even if your child is in a pull-up or a continence product, that we're still working on all of those skills surrounding toileting You know, the reaching, you can do some really fun activities. You know, we want to keep it fun, putting the pegs on the back of their shirt and getting them to reach around and practice that coordination and that balance to pull the pegs off the back of their shirt. Or you can even blow up 2 balloons and sticky tape it to the back of their chair, put a smear of Nutella up it, and get them to practice that wiping and that reaching, because that is a skill that's really hard for our children. But I think it's really important that even though they are in a pull-up, that we are still working on all of those skills, you know, those dressing skills. Can they pull up their pants? Can they pull down their pants? Can they do their buttons, their zippers, manage their underpants, and those sorts of things. And I know in my experience with some of the children that I see coming through, you know, my practice is that some do have that neurodivergence or that disability, and, you know, they do need some of those, you know, that assistance with those life skills and the fine motor skills and the gross motor skills and, you know, dressing skills and reaching and wiping. There are some kids that are just on their own developmental timeline, and that's totally okay. It's okay to support them and meet them at where they're at as well.
And it's still okay to use whatever you need to use for those kids. You know, you don't need to just
tough it out
or
exactly. Just deal with it. You know, you have to meet them where they're at. And if that is, you know, if you need a pull-up so that you can, as a family, go out and focus on life as a family, or, you know, take your child to soccer training and they're confident and they don't have to worry and they can engage and do what they do best, which is play, it's totally fine. Yeah, totally fine to use a pull-up.
A lot of the times you know, the advice you read online is once you go out of a nappy or once you go out of a pull-up, do not go back in. Like that's the worst thing you could do when it comes to toileting and learning about toileting. But I've worked with so many families where we've gone, okay, well, this is so anxiety provoking for you guys as a family and your child. Let's go back into a pull-up and just see what happens. And sometimes using a product like a pull-up just alleviates that pressure from the child to the point where they then have the confidence to go, okay, if I have an accident, it's okay, but now I can actually try toileting and suss out what that means for me and what that looks like, because I've got a barrier here and I've got something to fall back on, and no one's going to know if I have a huge accident. So they can be a really beautiful thing and a beautiful product for all kids.
And I feel like it just takes that load off their mind, and they can do things like focusing on their interoception skills and be a little bit more in tune with their body when they don't have that, you know, surrounding panic about, oh my gosh, I'm going to have an accident in public, and they're not worrying about it. It takes that load completely off them.
And they're not so heavily focused on their anxiety. They can focus on other body cues and signals.
Yep.